On this episode of Insight, more of us are choosing not to have children. Why the judgment? Tanya, you're in your 50s. What games did you enjoy playing as a child?
I think most kids used to play mum and dad and pretend they had little babies and so forth, but that was not something that I really enjoyed doing. So my dad built a cubby house for us one Christmas. I used to love getting dressed up and playing career woman. So we had a toy box full of old clothes and so forth. So I'd get myself all dressed up and put on my nan's old heels and grab a little purse with like fake money, and I'd strut out the door and I'm off to work now. And that was something that resonated more with me than playing mums and dads as such.
Did you say that you didn't want kids or didn't want to play a mum?
To me, it was just an innate thing that I just knew it just didn't feel like the right thing.
Was it unusual back then to say that you didn't want children?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in a very traditional household. Mum didn't go to work, dad worked 2 jobs. Her job was to, raise kids and look after the house. And I looked at that and went, well, I don't want that. And I was very vocal from a young age about saying, I don't want to have children. I wanted to travel the world and have an amazing career and have passion projects and do all these amazing things. I just saw motherhood as a trap, as something that would stop me doing all the great things that I wanted to do in life. And it was just something that I just went, I'm not anti-children in general, I'm just anti-children for me. And it wasn't the lifestyle that I wanted.
What inspired you to want that successful businesswoman lifestyle?
I grew up in the 70s and 80s, so I loved shows like Melrose Place and Ally McBeal and Dallas and Dynasty, and I saw all these amazing women on camera who, most of them didn't have children, and they were successful and glamorous and had these amazing lives and travelled and wore these beautiful clothes. And I looked at that and went, that's what I want. I want to have that sort of life. I never would say I'm going to be a mum or get married even. They weren't things that I wanted for my life.
Julia, you're in your 30s. Did you have any role models growing up?
Absolutely. Barbie.
What did you like about Barbie?
What I loved about Barbie was she had not only economic autonomy, but she had reproductive autonomy. You never saw her pregnant. She always had a fabulous life where she was travelling. She was everything from a doctor to a lawyer to a nurse. She did whatever she wanted. And for me as a little girl, that was so empowering.
Has your admiration for Barbie also influenced your adult life?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm the real life Barbie.
In what ways?
I have been able to live in 4 different countries. I have varying levels of proficiency in up to 6 languages. I have done everything from being a beauty writer to a procurement manager to a model to an actor to an investor. So I've really been able to have my finger in all of these different pies. And now I feel, I would say, so learned as a woman, so passionate, and I don't think that I would have that if I were sort of confined to the home in a life of domestic servitude.
Do you have children?
No. No, I don't want to.
Why is that?
I think that children are not for everybody. Motherhood is always the default route for many people. We are given small dolls to play with as children. We're never giving children the option to say, okay, you can go and do whatever you want in terms of vocation, in terms of a career where you want to live, your sexuality, all of these small nuances that are very much part and parcel of being an adult, and that I think more children need to be exposed to, that you have a choice.
Ella, what were your thoughts about motherhood when you were growing up?
When I was younger, I had the idea in my mind of, turn 25, buy a house, get a really good career, married, all the way up until I'm 27 or so. And kids just were in the mix there, but I never actually had a desire to have children. It just felt as though that was something that I was going to have to do. As a woman, that was just a conclusion I was going to have to reach. I didn't see anybody else particularly that was, talking about, I'm very happy and content with not having children. The only narrative that was really available, certainly when I was younger, was that it was very sad when people didn't have children, and that it was, something to be very sort of pitiful about. And that the only way to have any kind of fulfillment or, self-gratitude or self-actualisation is to have children.
being child-free is a choice as opposed to childless, was there a point where you realised you did have the option?
I think that's a really important distinction to make as well in terms of being child-free versus childless as well. And that is exactly what it is. This is about choice and agency. And once I realised, which seems very silly now, but when I was in my early 20s, I realised that this was actually a choice. It felt relieving. It felt really, really relieving of the fact of that I do actually have say on this and I do have agency and I can choose to not.
Gary, you're in your 40s. Was becoming a dad ever on the cards for you?
No. I first realised I was gay when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And as the years went on, I realised that that would mean it would be very unlikely that I would have children. And it was really sad. Everyone around me, all my family members, my teachers, any man in my life that I knew pretty much seemed to be married and have children, or that was the route that they would take. And it was super sad. I was in the closet. I felt really lonely. I felt like an outcast. I couldn't share it with anyone. I thought that I would be treated like a freak and I couldn't see a happy future or a normal future. The other thing was that there was a missing generation of gay men for me as role models because they had died from HIV or AIDS or homophobic hate crime, or they'd committed suicide, or they were in the closet. So the only gay people that I saw were stereotypes. They were laughed at or they were treated as scum. It was, in that sense, a very unhappy childhood. I had to mask who I was, like many gay men, and stay in the closet and pretend they were the things that I wanted, even though I didn't really know what I wanted. And I thought I did want that, actually, at the time. I think I would love to have had a normal life, but it just didn't seem possible for me.
What does life look like for you now without kids?
I'd like to think I'm the role model that I didn't have when I was younger. My life is full of friends, laughter, theatre, spontaneity, dinner parties, clubbing, refusing to conform to any of society's expectations of who I should be because of my age or because of my sexual orientation, living outside the box. I just spent 2.5 years living and working as a digital nomad in South America and learning Spanish. So life is completely different from what I was told it would be when I was growing up, which was that I would be lonely and that I would have a joyless life and that I was a threat to family values. And also that gay men shouldn't be around children. There was this persistent stereotype that we shouldn't be trusted around children, and I absorbed it. And now I feel like I've carved out a life for myself that I never could see as possible when I was younger.
David, did you ever imagine yourself as a father?
I did, actually, yeah. I just didn't meet somebody who I wanted to have children with. And eventually, 7 years ago, I finally met my partner, my current partner. And we were both well into our 40s at the time. And she had already, when she turned 40, had a self-realisation that she may never have children, even though it was something she also wanted. We had a discussion about whether we wanted to have children, and we both decided that that was not the case. And the main reason was that we'd only just met. We wanted all the things that other people had had younger in life, like getting married, building a house together. So we wanted the focus to be on us, as opposed to somewhat quickly redirecting our focus to being parents.
Did others expect you to become a parent?
Yeah, I think so, very much. My sister went overseas when she was quite young and had made a decision to focus on career and not having children. So she'd made that decision at a very young age. So I think my mum and dad both had this expectation that I'd be the one to have children. And I think that's because when it comes to the conversations I've had with other men, there's always this belief that men can pretty much have children at any age that they choose to. Whereas it becomes more medically challenging for women to have children as they get older. So any conversations I had with my friends would mainly be them sharing about how the joys that they had of being a dad, and that don't worry, one day you'll be able to have that same thing. You know, there's no rush. And so that was the conversations we mainly had.
Ella, you're 35 now. Have you ever felt pressured to have children?
Absolutely, by various different people, family, friends, colleagues. You'll never know love unless you have a child, those kinds of things, yeah.
Julia, what about you? Were there expectations on you to become a mother?
No, I'm quite lucky, but I do have people that question me from time to time. And something that I find very interesting is that child-free women are subject to an intense amount of scrutiny compared to parents who are not.
Ashley, you have a young son. What do you think of others who choose not to have kids?
I have actually always been quite jealous of my friends who knew from a really early age that they didn't want to have children. I've always felt this desire to be a mum, and I've actually always felt like it's really held me back.
So what were you envious of?
I guess the freedom. And I feel like so much of my life was based around the fact that I knew I wanted to have a family one day. And I needed to consider that in pretty much every decision I ever made from a very young age. So I lived in London 10 years ago. And I was always calculating, you know, I've got to move home by this time. I've got to meet somebody by this time. I've got to start trying for a family at this time. I've got to do X, Y, Z in my career by this time. Whereas my friends who knew that they didn't want children didn't have to make any of those calculations.
So motherhood was always part of your plan?
It was. I don't remember a time of not wanting children, and I can't really explain it. It's just always kind of been there. I just always knew I was going to be a mum.
Your son is nearly 2 years old. What is life like as a mum?
It's all of the cliches. I feel like motherhood has been spoken about so much in so many different formats, and I'm not sure I have much to add to that conversation, except for the fact that it's the hardest thing I've ever done. It's also the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Michelle, did you always want to be a parent?
No, I never wanted to have kids my whole life. When I was 20-ish, I became pregnant and I made a decision to have a termination. And then I went on to have lots of great relationships with great, beautiful people, none of whom I ever wanted to have a family with. Through my life, I've had cyclical periods of depression, and I remember a time where I considered having a baby might appease that feeling of hopelessness or give me a sense of purpose, but I didn't follow through with it.
In your late 20s, you were diagnosed with a condition affecting your ovaries. What did the doctor say to you?
The doctor told me if I ever chose to fall pregnant or wanted to fall pregnant, it would require IVF support. Hearing that wasn't actually a big deal at the time. It was almost a relief. It meant I didn't have to be as considerate with contraception. That's how I rationalised it. And I met a beautiful person and we fell in love, and I can only describe what happened as having this animalistic sort of intrinsic urge to procreate. There was no rationalising it. It was just I wanted to make a baby.
And did you fall pregnant?
Really quickly.
And did you have that baby?
Yeah.
What was that period like once you'd had the baby?
I think I probably had a predisposition to antenatal and postnatal depression, which I did experience. I think it was compounded by a close friend of mine was pregnant at the same time, and just after my baby was born and I was finding my feet, establishing my identity as a parent, she had a very late-term stillbirth. And I just felt jealous that she had been thrown this life rope and I was stuck in this sort of raging river that I didn't want to be in and couldn't get out of.
You ended up having 2 children. How do you feel about motherhood now?
I embrace being a mum. It is not the core part of my identity. I think, like most parents, I try to be a good parent, but I have absolutely considered and imagined disappearing and not being a mum anymore and thinking of ways that I could get out of it. And
what do you mean by disappearing, like sort of starting life over?
Yeah, starting life over. I've chosen not to do that. It would mean the end of everything that I enjoy about my life.
Jess, growing up, you often looked after your siblings. Did you enjoy that?
As a child, I did enjoy that. I didn't know any different. I think there was pressure and expectation for me to help out in the household. My parents had separated when I was about 10. But yeah, looking back now, I think I'm a little bit resentful towards that.
Did looking after your siblings change the way you felt about motherhood for yourself?
I felt my mum struggle. I watched her struggle, and I felt that maybe we were a burden to her and her mental health. I know she loves us and loved us, but many things have happened that made me question why she even bothered having us as well. So I think that just made me realise that it wasn't for me, and I didn't want to have children and be a burden, or they be a burden on me. I just felt like I would resent them just as much as maybe that's how I felt with my own mother.
You fell pregnant at 32. What did you decide to do?
Without any hesitation, I made that phone call to get an abortion. My best mate also fell pregnant around the same time, so we both had, I think just having her too just helped that, and we both had a great experience.
You had to wait a couple of weeks before you could get that abortion. What was that time like for you?
Horrible. I felt like something had taken over my body. A parasite, pretty much, it felt like, had taken over, and I just couldn't wait to get rid of it. But it really set in that I never have a desire to be pregnant or to give birth or become a mother.
Were you in a relationship at the time?
I wouldn't say we're in a relationship, maybe a situationship. He also had children, and I knew he wasn't going to be someone that would be able to take care of me if I decided to keep the child.
Elizabeth, you have 4 daughters. Did you picture yourself as a parent when you were younger?
I did. I always wanted to have kids from when I was younger. I always actually wanted to have 3. And then when I got married, I had 3 girls, and the older 2 were really good friends. And when I got pregnant with my 3rd, I thought, oh, I can't bear to leave her without having someone at similar age. So then I had a 4th and another girl. And yeah, it worked well for me. I eat, sleep and breathe my kids.
Was a child-free lifestyle ever an option for you?
No, I don't think so. I knew from when I was younger, my 2 older brothers were a lot older than me, and it was pretty much set that they weren't going to get married and have kids. So I kind of felt like it was down to me, and my mum really, really wanted to have grandkids. Actually, she never wanted to have kids herself. But when she married my dad, she decided to have kids, and she turned out to be a great mum. Yeah, it was just something that I wanted to as well. I wanted to make sure she had grandchildren.
What do you say to people in this room who've chosen not to have kids?
The only thing I would say, I just worry that people, when they get older, they might regret not having kids, because it's nice to know when you get older you have your kids to help look after you. I think that's a part of why we have kids, is when we get older, we've got, hopefully me and my husband have got 4 girls that will look after us when we get older, and I worry that that might be something people would regret when they get older.
I love the mini. It is my favourite part about my lifestyle. I love getting out there and hooning around. I'm not sure hooning is the right word.
Well, hooning within the speed limit. We're Wayne and Kylie Scholes.
We've been married for almost 27 years.
We don't have children.
We didn't not try and have children. Life just got busy. We just did our thing, and if we had kids, yay, but it didn't happen, so we just continued with what we were passionate about. We are the owners of Mowbridge Tourist Park, adults only park.
So adults only means no kids. It doesn't mean no clothes, obviously.
So no swingers, no nudity. So a couple of months ago we put up a Facebook post just to announce that we were going adult only, and kind of went a bit viral, got a bit scary at the same time.
It was surprisingly positive. Having travelled overseas and staying at adults only resorts, we realised that we had an opportunity. It's a niche.
Good morning, thank you for staying. Hope you had a great stay.
Thank you. No, we had a really good time.
So a lot of travellers and tourists get displaced during school holidays, and they feel like they haven't got a place to go where they can be comfortable.
So at our caravan park, you're not going to find jumping pillows, playgrounds, go-karts.
No scooters, no bikes doing wheelies, just quiet.
Not everyone wants to be around everyone else's kids. So whether that's your own children or whether it's grandchildren.
If you're an adult and you want to relax, sit by the pool with a book, have a glass of champagne, the last thing you want is kids splashing and jumping in the pool all around you. So there is a place for that, but this is not one of those.
Tanya, you're child-free and you love travelling. Would you opt for an adults-only holiday?
Absolutely, every single time that I can, for sure.
Okay, why is that?
I like to go on holidays and relax by the pool and drink champagne or cocktails or whatever it is. And when you've got screaming kids or kids jumping in pools or just causing havoc, and parents who often don't chastise them and let them do whatever they want, it's very annoying and inconsiderate to other people in the resort. And look, I remember being at a place in Kingscliff a few years ago, and I was having a nice relaxing massage, and I could hear these kids screaming and yelling and carry on by the pool, and nothing was done. And it's the same on a plane. Like, it's very annoying. And I've actually experienced this today, travelling down here, of a kid screaming its head off. Thank God it was a short flight. But it is hard. I mean, if I did the same thing, I'd be kicked out of somewhere. And I understand that they're children, I understand that. But when, we're on holiday, I call it going away with OPKs, other people's kids. I understand everyone wants to travel, but if I see family friendly, I'm like, I'm not booking there, that's for sure. I like small, boutique, quiet places, and if it's adults only, even better.
Julia, you embrace a child-free life and you travel a lot. How do you feel about sharing flights with children?
I think it's quite problematic, especially as a neurodivergent woman. I have ADHD. A screaming child in a plane, we are going to experience it very differently in terms of panic attacks, and our fight or flight is often triggered by sustained screaming, yelling, and it's a very different experience to what a mother who's maybe a little bit desensitised to it, and this is something that sorely needs to be addressed.
Would you support adults-only flights?
Unequivocally. Absolutely. I think it's very important for people to have a sense of comfort and a sense of safety while travelling, and now we need to not default to family-friendly being the automatic right of way.
Ella, do you agree? Should we have designated child-free zones?
I have realised that as I've gotten older that women still are shouldered with that burden of child rearing, and they don't want their babies crying either, and they don't want those noises to be made as well, and it's stressful for them too. And so to have empathy for that position and understanding that they're trying their best, and yes, it is very uncomfortable and it is stressful, but there's very little that can be done.
Julia, how do you find parents respond if their kids are misbehaving in public spaces?
Most of the time, I would say 98% of the time, they don't do anything. They're quite negligent in that regard. Kids jumping up on the seats, screaming that they're going to kill their mother, their sister, they're going to kill everyone on the plane, punching. I've had my seat punched before, kicked. I've been kicked.
What do you think of this term, gentle parenting?
I'm all for empathetic parenting, but there has to be a limit, especially when it comes to young boys.
Tanya, you're Generation X. Have parenting styles shifted since your parents brought you up?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. I remember when we grew up, like, our parents' lives didn't stop because, we had to be in bed at a certain time. I remember Mum and Dad used to play tennis once a week. These days, people would say, I can't go because my child has to be asleep. Well, we'd get our pyjamas on and sleep in the back of the car. We thought it was great, so it was a novelty. But they didn't stop living because their child had to have a dinner at a certain time, or they had to do, something else. But there's definitely a huge difference in discipline and accountability. I would never in a million years have spoken to my parents the way I see children acting now. I would never have got away with throwing myself on the ground and having a temper tantrum in the middle of the shopping centre and here's a lolly to be quiet. Like, that would never have happened. I grew up in a very loving household, but we also had discipline, and there were consequences for actions. So, if we did something wrong when we were younger, we'd get a smack around the butt. I wasn't abused, But a smack doesn't hurt a child. As we got older, Mum would say, well, I'm going to ground you, or we didn't get to watch our favourite TV show, which always hurt because there wasn't much on TV then. So you looked forward to your favourite TV show. You were like, damn, I can't watch a country practice tonight. You know? But we knew that there was consequences to our actions, and we treated adults with respect. We treated anyone older than us with respect. And these days, that gentle parenting approach, it's not doing parents any favours. It's certainly not doing kids any favours either, because we're seeing so many badly behaved children that are just entitled and think they should have everything handed to them. And I'm not saying that's every parent, but in general, that's sort of what it feels like a lot in society these days.
Ashley, you have a toddler. What's it like when you're out and about with him?
I actually find being out and about with my toddler really stressful, and mainly because of the opinions of other people. I have a toddler, so it's important to acknowledge his age. He is not even 2. So when he is out having these temper tantrums, there's very little that we can do about it. But even when he was younger, even when he was a baby, I didn't realise that so much of my anxiety as a new mum was based around the judgment from other people when my child was crying. And he cried a lot. I had a baby who cried a lot. I would avoid leaving the house. I would avoid public spaces. And I would say I probably still do now. But I also need to check myself sometimes and say, do you know what? I'm getting stressed out because I can see eyes on me and he's fine. He's not hurting anybody. He might be an inconvenience, but he's not doing anything wrong.
How do you feel about child-free spaces?
I think that they are great, because I think that if you're in a child-free space, it's because you don't want to be around children, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. The scenario of getting a massage while you're on holiday with listening to other people's screaming children also sounds awful to me as a mother. Even if it was my own child, I think it would be terrible. And actually, hearing your own child scream, you're probably more sensitive to it than anybody else. But I'm all for child-free spaces. I really feel like my philosophy is that you are entitled to a child-free life, but not a child-free world.
You recently travelled overseas with your son for the first time. How did that go?
It was a trip that we put off for a really long time because I was quite nervous about it. You hear horror stories about planes and toddlers being poorly behaved, and just the thought of walking down that aisle and everybody staring at me and being like, oh my God, here we go. It just gave me a lot of anxiety. And I have to say it went so much better than I thought it would. I think a lot of that was because my mindset changed before we left, and I thought, you know what, we are entitled to a trip as well. We're entitled to a holiday as well. We specifically chose family-friendly destinations. You know, for me, it was when we were booking a hotel, reading reviews and hearing about how child-friendly it was. And we chose locations based on those reviews.
Where did you end up going?
We went to Singapore and Thailand.
So there was a sort of family-friendly approach?
Yes, definitely.
What did that look like in practice?
It felt like a cultural difference to me, because it really was quite stark, the difference between being at home and being both in Singapore and in Thailand. When we walked around, you know, say we're walking through the resort or wherever it was, people would look at him and be so excited that he had arrived. And even when we had meltdowns, which we did, and often, people didn't seem inconvenienced by it. They would almost try and help.
And how did that make you feel as a mum?
So much relief. And it really showed that the anxiety that I was feeling was because of the reactions of other people. And it really makes you feel like, I would say as a mother, it makes you feel welcome and accepted.
More Australians are choosing not to have children. The fertility rate today compared with 50 years ago has declined to below replacement levels. Those are the figures there. Ella, you're a sociologist. What do you think has led to this shift in attitude towards having children?
There's a lot of things at play here. I think women's liberation is really one of the main things here, that we're seeing now more than ever, women are actually getting to choose and they're seeing options for themselves. And within that, some of them are really taking on board they don't want to have any, or they want to have few. There's obviously a lot of other things at play as well. We've got, you know, economic issues, we've got natural issues as well. People are really considering the future that is available for their children and whether or not they can actually afford it too. We know that a lot of people are completely under the pump, and when you're in two-parent households now as well. Both of them usually have to be in the workforce too, and what that looks like in terms of complicating things when bringing a child into the mix. But I think as we've got more access to contraception, reproductive health care, options for women to own property, divorce, get married if they wish to anyone that they like as well, we're seeing a decline in fertility rate because there's other options.
Elizabeth, your daughters are aged from 19 to 11.
Yes.
Why do you think women are deciding against motherhood?
I think the feminist movement, for me, I think from what I see, is the number one reason. I think we're teaching girls that they can do everything. You can have kids, you can get married, you can get an education, you can work. There are exceptions to the rule, I think, of women who can do everything, but I don't think it's the majority. And I think there's just too much pressure being put on the feminist movement's just putting too much pressure on girls and telling them you can do everything. And they're putting having children back later, which is then obviously causing fertility problems. They're not being able to have children earlier. I think personally that's why.
Tanya, you never wanted to be a mother. Did the feminist movement influence your decision?
I don't think so, because I always knew from a very young age that I didn't want to have children. So it was an innate thing within me. So I was too young to even know what the feminist movement even was. It wasn't something that was spoken about, particularly as a young girl. Like, you didn't hear this narrative about, feminism. So I think every woman should be able to have the choice. If they don't want to have any children, 1 children, 5 children, fantastic, you go and do that. But if you choose not to do that, that's fine, but you shouldn't be judged and criticised for that choice as well, because they are both life choices. One's not right, one's not wrong, they're just different.
Elizabeth, do you feel like marriage in particular and motherhood is for all women?
Yeah, I think for us in our family, it's sort of shown from a young age that that's the path that girls should take. You get married relatively young and you build a family with your husband from a young age, and everything that you do is with your husband. So it's not put it off until later and do things on your own or with your girlfriends, and then you find a husband later on. It's better to do it earlier, and then you build a life together. That's pretty much how we live our lives and what we practice.
Tanya, you and your husband celebrated your 30th wedding anniversary last year. Congratulations. Did you always agree about not becoming parents?
Yes, I think it's really important to have this conversation before you have commitment. So I was young when I got married. We got engaged when I was 19, but I was never one that always wanted to get married either. I was like, if it happened, it happened. But, we just met at a time, and I just he knew he was a good guy, and I didn't want to, miss out on that. But, I said to him, if this is something that you want, if you want to be a father, then us getting married is not going to work, because I'm not going to change my mind for you, your family, or for anybody else. I know what I want. So I said, that's something that you need to consider. And he was like, I'm fine with that. He said, we've got nieces and nephews and other friends, children. So if we want children in our life, we can have children in our life. We don't have to have our own children to have that. So he has always been very respectful of myself and those choices. And let me tell you right now, he is very happy with his lifestyle right now. So I say to him, you would not be coming home from work and sitting in front of watching your Netflix or watching the football or doing it. You would be running around, taking kids to soccer practice and doing all these things that parents have to do. And it's a hard life. It's a big sacrifice. He knows that he wouldn't have done half the things that he's done if we had have had children.
Michelle, you didn't always want children and now you have 2. Looking back, is there anything you'd do differently?
Looking back, I wish I had have been more considered in my decision to have kids. I think it was quite a passive process that's resulted in me being a mum to 2 children. Had I have reconsidered back then, and those beautiful little souls that exist today hadn't come to be, I would have the capacity to contribute in a way to the world that I don't feel like I have the capacity to do now, because my kids take so much of my resources, my time, my money. I feel like a selfish person for not wanting to have kids, even though I do have them. And some would say I'm really fortunate to have had such an easy journey into parenthood without IVF, without a lot of effort to get here. I often imagine my life if I didn't have my kids and what I would be doing, and that would be injecting worth through my work and caring for my elderly parents and being able to offer a safe home to children that do already exist in the foster systems that are so overwhelmed. And I could offer that space because I do like kids. I do find it incredibly stressful being a parent.
You've chosen not to reveal your identity. Is there stigma around how you feel?
I think so. I didn't want to show my identity because I know that expressing the way I feel about this would hurt my family, and I don't want to hurt my family. I love them. I think there is a different attitude to if a father figure leaves or abandons their children, whereas if a mum leaves, they are really perceived as being callous or unhinged. It's far less socially acceptable to do.
Do you talk about how you feel with many other people?
My partner, the father of my kids, absolutely knows everything and knew I was coming on the show today. And last night he gave me a pep talk to just validate that everything that I'm saying and feeling is okay, and that other people probably do feel it, but I tend to just say things, whereas others might keep it to themselves.
Jessica, you had a hysterectomy at 31. Why?
Mainly because I had an IUD, which failed to the tune of a pregnancy and a miscarriage of said pregnancy before I even knew I was pregnant. And it was only after all of those events that I was able to finally go to my doctors and say, can I please have the hysterectomy now that I've been asking for a number of years? And they eventually acquiesced. They still made me wait 6 months between when I had the miscarriage and when I had the hysterectomy to make sure it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. And I'm like, fine, whatever. I've been waiting years. Another 6 months is nothing. You know, whatever I need to do to get it done, I will do it.
Leanne, you're Jessica's mum.
Yes.
How did you react when you heard the news about the hysterectomy?
None of us had anticipated this. But with her going ahead with wanting to have a hysterectomy, I can understand the fear and the uncertainties that she went through. But as her mother, you mourn the fact that you won't have the grandchildren and the continuity of your family, because, let's face it, you have to have children for the families to, you know, move into the future.
Jessica, do you understand your mum's point of view?
I can to a degree, but I've never felt that way about having children. I think not everyone should have children. You know, the line that I've always liked is everyone has a voice, but not everyone's an opera singer. So, you know, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Gary, you've embraced a lifestyle of partying, of travelling and not parenting. Is that how you see your future?
Yes and no. For the next few years, yes. I love my life at the moment, especially the travel. I did look at my life in recent years and think, is this what I still want to be doing when I'm 60, 70, 80? And I did think it would probably be quite nice to have a slightly different life at that point from the life I'm living now, just because the life I'm living now requires a lot of energy. I still have that energy, but I'm not sure I'll have that energy at that stage in life. So I did start to think, what will my life look like at that point? And again, without those role models that as gay men we didn't really have, you're kind of treading your own path a little bit.
You were working on a story at one time. What was that about?
Yeah, I'm a journalist and I was doing a feature. There was a shortage of sperm in New South Wales from fertility clinics, and I was chatting to my editor and we decided to do a feature about why do men donate sperm. Through doing that story and through my research, I interviewed a straight man and a gay man, and the gay man who I interviewed started talking about how the lifting of anonymity in sperm donation was the very thing that attracted him to donate, and a light bulb went off in my head.
Ella, you don't want to have children, but at 34 you became an egg donor. Why?
Because I had eggs and I didn't want to use them, essentially. Yeah, I just knew that there were people that really, really wanted to have children and would be really, really good parents. I knew for myself that I wouldn't be, but I didn't want to have people feeling that they were going to miss out from something that, you know, maybe they've wanted their whole lives because of something that I had.
How was the process for you? What was the process like?
Awful. The process was awful. I have a newfound respect for anyone who's undergone IVF. It was horrendous. I was so sick. I was so angry. I would come home from coffee with a friend and they'd text me after and say, if anything's matter, you know, you can always let me know. And I'd realise that I'd been really angry about something, or just little things would frustrate me like nothing else as well. I was just very, very angry.
How many doctor's appointments did you have to have?
Loads. I was at doctors, specialists. I was on the phone. I had to take just a myriad of medications, self-injections, at different times, and make sure that they were very specific times too. I had to be very careful with everything that I put in my body and very, very careful with what I did as well. It was taxing, and I didn't realise that as well. And because it's altruistic in Australia, there was no, I didn't get any of that time back.
Were all the doctors supportive of what you wanted to do?
No, absolutely not. Some of the specialists were curious. You know, I'd had to see them for various other reasons and explained why I was there, and they were like, oh, goodness, I didn't even, you know, think that was an option. Others were very aggrieved. And some didn't want to sign me off on it and said that they wouldn't allow this to happen. Had you considered, will you regret this later? You know, what if you meet someone and they want to use you as an incubator? You know, all these types of things had kind of come up, and it was very interesting. I had to do significant amounts of counselling before I was even allowed to enter into the program. But even beyond that, these doctors thought that they knew better than I did.
Would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd do it again next week if I could.
Gary, you donated sperm several times. What was the process like for you?
It was fine, actually. Also had to have 2 psychology sessions to be approved. By that point, I'd thought about doing it for 6 months before I did it. In addition to the 2 psychology sessions, you have to donate at least 6 or 7 times, which is how many times I did. I was told some men donate up to 15 times. The whole process, I think, took almost a year. So it was quite involved, but it was pretty painless and it was joyful. I just thought, I'm creating a future both for myself and for these people who want children and for the children themselves. It's really exciting. So I really enjoyed it.
7 children were conceived from your sperm donations. You wrote each of them a letter. What did you say?
My letter said it was one of the biggest privileges of my life to donate to your parents. They love you very, very much. They've gone to great lengths to have you. Always listen to your mum because she's probably right. I'd love to... I'm a journalist and I'd love to tell you all about me and my life, and more importantly, I'd love to hear about you and your life. But if that's something you'd rather not do, I'm totally at peace with that, and I'll think about you every day. And it was very meaningful for me to make this decision, and I'd love to meet you.
What kind of relationship do you hope to have with them in the future?
It is entirely up to them, and I want it to be driven by them. I'm not their dad is who brings them up. That's something I'm very clear about as well. But if that's something they want in their lives, then later on in life, it opens... My future now has a possibility to it that no longer existed, that didn't exist previously.
Ella, have any children been born from your donated eggs?
Not that I'm aware of. I do know that there was a number of follicles. It would have been about 6 donor recipients that could have been eligible, but I'm not 100% sure if there's anyone.
If any children were conceived, would you like to be contacted by them in future?
It's an interesting one. I have a bit of a different opinion on that one. And I also had to write the letter, and I had a really hard time writing that letter because it almost felt like something that wasn't real, or a concept that I couldn't quite get my head around, of writing a letter to a child that didn't exist yet, but I was also helping to form in a sort of proxy way. I'm ambivalent about it. I very much, the ball is in their court, and, you know, that is all I've said in the paperwork too. I don't believe that I would have the emotional capacity to be anything more than a coffee once every 10 years. I don't think that I could provide anything more than just a friendly hello.
Jess, you don't enjoy being around kids that much, yet you became a teacher. How did that go?
Contradictory much. I think when I decided to become a teacher, I probably didn't understand how I felt about children. I wanted a job that I could travel around the world. I was very passionate about that. I felt pressured that I needed to have a stable job and career, that I couldn't just keep travelling and living freely. Having siblings that had children young and being around children, I naturally just thought, oh, maybe a teacher would be the right path. So I went down that route and I did not last long, probably 2 years in the profession.
What didn't you like about it?
Children. I think being neurodiverse, there was a lot of children and parents who don't respect teachers or people in general. Being in that profession, I think, really opened my eyes. And maybe that's where I started to realise that children were definitely not something that I enjoyed being around.
Do you feel differently around your friends' children?
Yes and no. I try to be diplomatic. I just say, no, or maybe I'll just say I'm busy. Or I've had a conversation with a very close friend who was offended by that. I think she expected me to be some kind of auntie. I've had this with a few friends. But I never was consulted if that's what I wanted in life, if I wanted to be the auntie or the village. So I've tried to explain that we just have different lifestyles and I would prefer to just have adult-only time to cherish our friendship without screaming children, and it's very overwhelming.
And how's that friendship now?
It's rocky.
David, you and your wife are child-free. What does family look like to you?
Well, if you'd asked me that question when I was much younger, I probably would have given you a very textbook answer and said that family was your brothers and sisters, parents, children, aunts and uncles. But over the years, I've come to realise that family means a different thing to me. So I established a very close-knit circle of friends who have been my friends now, a lot of them for over 20 years. And so today I would say family for me is actually the people who emotionally support me, those who I'm closest to, people who I have the most in common with, and people who I can know that they'll be there for me no matter what the situation is.
Have you made plans for your future as you age?
Yes, people would always say to me, children will be there and look after you as you get older. But I've had numerous conversations with my friends in this circle, and we've all agreed that as we age, we're going to be there and support each other. And even when we get to a point where we're going to move into retirement, we're all going to try and find a place in Australia together to move into so that we can continue to support each other right through until the end.
Elizabeth, you believe in traditional family values. Has this always been the way for you?
Not really. When I was a child, I grew up just with my mum in the house. She was a single parent. We used to celebrate Christmas, and I used to think to myself, why are we celebrating Christmas when they really weren't religious? And it didn't really seem like a point, like there was much point to it. And I met my husband and we got married when I was 19. He was Muslim, so it took a few years until our first child was born when I was 24. And then I started to see that there was actually a purpose in Islam. They actually celebrate things with a meaning, with a purpose. So when our kids came along, we obviously were full into that. We adapted and that's how we've lived our lives.
So you converted to Islam?
Yeah, yes.
And has that made you feel differently about family?
Definitely. It's pretty much all around us. We've been very fortunate.
Your eldest daughter is 19 and is married.
Yes.
Do all your children want to have kids?
3 out of the 4 of them do. My 17-year-old is my free-spirited child. Once she turns 18, which is in August, she's ready to take her passport and she just wants to go. She doesn't want to hang around. So I want her to do that. I want her to experience things, but it's not going to be, very easy to let her go.
Tanya, you've been married for 30 years and don't have children. How does family look for you?
I think there's this misconception of just because you don't have children, you don't have a family. And I have a fabulous family. So I have my husband, I have my beautiful rescue dogs. I've got what I call family, so my friends that
There's your dog.
my friends that I consider family. But, my dogs are my world.
Do you think you might ever regret not having children?
Absolutely not. I haven't regretted it so far. I know a lot of women who are older, in their 80s, who have very happy and fulfilled lives. I think this whole notion of having children so they'll look after you when you're older is absolutely ridiculous. I know so many people, myself included, that are not around our older parents and not looking after them. So just because you have children doesn't mean they're going to be there to look after you. So, and I think it's important to surround yourself with friends and other people in your community that you can build that sort of family connection with and have them around you.
Would you say that no kids equals no problems?
I wish. Wouldn't it be nice? I wish that was the case. I think that is a ridiculous notion because everybody has problems. It doesn't matter if you have no kids, 1 kid, 10 kids. My problems are just different to our mother's problems. And, we all have them, unfortunately. I wish I had no problems.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Thank you to you all for being here. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.